All right, we're speaking with Matt Vautour. I'm saying that right again, Matt, right?
You are saying it right. Well done.
Good.
Well done.
You're Westboro's Matt Vautour, is that right?
I am Westboro's Matt Vautour. There you go.
Local guy, sports writer for Mass Live. You can check out his writings at masslive.com. Let's talk Celtics. Tonight's the big game. It's been a while since the Celtics have been in the finals, and they're going up against the Warriors, who really, what is it, the last 8 years, they've had 6 appearances in the finals, and that's one of the questions I had about this team as a casual basketball fan. How important is the finals experience going to be as a factor?
I think it's certainly a factor in Game 1. I think anybody that approaches it like this is just another basketball game is kidding themselves. There's something about being in the finals, and I think if the Celtics can kind of navigate that through the first game, especially on the road, I think that goes a long way. I think the fact that Ime Udoka did this as an assistant coach with the Spurs a couple times is helpful. But for when you look at Draymond Green and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala, I don't know at what point he's back in the series, but he's certainly a voice that's listened to in that Golden State locker room. I think that stuff does matter, and I think I think it certainly can be a factor, especially early on.
And the other factor I want to ask about is injuries, because at this time of the season, in really any sport, players are pretty banged up. Celtics have got some guys who, like Robert Williams, who's dealing with, a bone bruise, and Marcus Smart, who's ankle. He's got a problem with his ankle. There's a question if these guys...
Smart has about 18 things that are wrong with him right now.
I know.
It's a question of what's bothering him the most from game to game.
Yeah, so what are injuries going to be a factor? The Warriors have their issues. How are injuries going to be a factor going into this? I
think injuries are probably hurting the Celtics a little bit more than the Warriors because the guys that have them are you're counting on more. The Celtics are a different team defensively and even offensively when Robert Williams can play like Robert Williams. And so certainly having the 3 days between the end of the last series and the start of this one is big. The 2 days off between games, I think, will help the Celtics. So the Golden State is hoping to get Gary Payton Jr. back, and he's not, or Gary Payton II, I guess is what he uses. They're hoping to get him back, maybe even for Game 1, but he's more of a rotation guy, a defensive guy. Andre Iguodala might come back at some point in the series, Otto Porter, but those are role player guys for them. The Celtics, having Robert Williams and certainly Marcus Smart, those guys are really important pieces for them. So I think the health factor right now favors Golden State. I think their core guys are healthier than the Celtics are.
Do the Celtics still have a number one defense with a Marcus Smart who's not 100%?
I wouldn't say they're number one. I think it's still a better defense than the Warriors have. I think it's not quite when you're asking him to guard 5 guys. And sometimes guys that are bigger than him, sometimes guys that to switch and be able to switch on all those guys. Not nearly as easy for him to match up with bigger guys or with quicker guys when that's happening.
Who are the guys we should be watching here to come up for the Celtics? Like, say Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, they don't make it at least the first couple games of the finals. Who are the guys are we looking at to stand up?
Well, certainly Derek White, who played so well against Miami defensively. I mean, the numbers against him, and when he was guarding guys, they didn't score. And so to be able to have, if Marcus Smart is healthy, to have he and Derek White at times on the floor together on Steph Curry and Klay Thompson is significant. And if Marcus Smart is not at 100%, he doesn't have to spend all that time on Steph Curry. You can put a guy like Derek White on him, and I think that goes a long way. Robert Williams isn't healthy. You're asking a lot more out of Al Horford. You're asking a lot more out of Grant Williams. Grant Williams, from a size-wise thing, Grant Williams and Draymond Green is kind of an interesting matchup, and both of those guys are smart players who make the most of their ability. They're both a little undersized to be inside guys, and I think the fact that they kind of play similar, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that kind of chess match happens between them underneath.
A kind of a side note to the actual games. Derek White and Grant Williams both named their kids their new babies Hendricks. Is that coincidence, or is that just being too much of a team player? right there.
I think supposedly Derek White apologized to him, but I think he definitely stole it from him. I think he sounds like, that's awesome. I'm doing that too. And if you're naming your kid a rock star last name, Hendricks is pretty good.
Yeah, that's a good name. I like it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd have to think what I would go with in that scenario. It feels like Van Halen Vautour with the double V's might have been pretty good.
That's awesome. Well, I told my wife I wanted to name our child Geddy Lee Shu, whether it was a boy or a girl, but she definitely did not bite on that one. And finally, I think the great story in this is that both Udoka and Kerr, they both studied under Greg Popovich. They played for him, they coached with him. I think that's a great story. They were both, took part in USA basketball.
It is. It's kind of the Plato and Aristotle and Socrates of basketball, sort of lineage there. Both of those guys. I mean, Popovich is such a smart guy, and he's been so good at figuring out what his assistant coaches are good at, and putting them in positions to really thrive. And I think a lot of coaches by nature are really they're almost maniacs in terms of how much they need to control because of how tenuous their jobs are. Popovich has such a confidence in his own abilities that he can really get the most out of other people's because he's not threatened by their abilities. And I think he looked at both of those guys and saw real potential in what they could do. And he's proven right. You get a guy from that coaching tree, and you immediately like what that possibility is. And I thought when the Celtics first hired Udoka, I didn't know a ton about him other than he's a Popovich guy. And so you start from the beginning, and I give Brad Stevens credit for that. He went out and hired a guy that came from a different thing and said, all right, well, Stevens has his own knowledge. Let's get somebody that brings all of that Popovich knowledge with him. And I think that was really smart, and it's really proven effective for the Celtics.
Well, the Warriors are favored in these finals.
I think it's interesting for sure. I was looking at the odds the other day, and I'm not a gambler, but I was putting it out for a story. The most likely, according to Vegas, the most likely outcome is Warriors in 7, but the second most likely outcome is Celtics in 6, which I thought was kind of an interesting balance. I think the Celtics have played the Warriors really well over the years, and that was a lot with Brad Stevens, but they played him really well in March. I think that game was on St. Patrick's Day. They handled them really well. I think this has really good series potential. If this has 7 games kind of written all over it, and I think once the Celtics kind of get over the hey, you're in the finals and handling that, I think the Celtics defense is going to be as tough as anything the Warriors have seen, probably more tougher than anything the Warriors have seen in the playoffs. And then the Warriors' offenses will be the best that the Celtics have gone against. And so you watch both of these teams do a really good job, both of these coaches from a chess match standpoint, adjusting as the playoffs have gone on. It'll be fun to watch them adjust to each other.
All right, Matt Vautour, Westborough's Matt Vautour from Mass Live. You can check out his sports writing at masslive.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk Celtics this morning. We appreciate it.